Ladies and gentlemen, I hope your day is going beautiful. I hope the sun is shining, the birds are singing. I hope the wind is at your back. I got a great show for you today. Prepare to be inspired by the dynamic Manda Koss, a fractional CRO, wielding expertise in deploying marketing, sales, and operational support to catapult businesses into the new dimensions of success. Manda's journey took a transformative turn a few years ago when she literally walked on fire, an experience that ignited the belief that anything is possible when you're willing to step up. Manda, thank you so much for being here today. That was a very brief introduction, and I was hoping you could color it in with a little bit of background.
Well, thank you so much. First and foremost, thank you for having me. It's always great to be able to come in and share a little bit of my gifts with the world. I think craziest thing about me, things that you might want to know. So ever since really the early infancy of my career, I will always say that I was really brought in to kind of calm chaos, and for whatever reason, I love it. It doesn't scare me; it actually excites me. I was introduced to probably one of my most chaotic environments that I had, and that's my daughter leaving for work.
How's it?
So really one of my most chaotic moments was, my husband, he served in the Marine Corps and he was deploying overseas. We have 3 beautiful children at the time. Our youngest was 4 months old. My middle was a year old. And my oldest that you just saw walk out, go to work, she was 7 at the time. And I was presented really with an opportunity that allowed for me to go to work for a startup. They had said to me, we have this challenge, we have this problem. We don't know why it's not working and we need you to fix it. And I basically gave them every opportunity to say, leave this crazy girl behind. There was so much that was happening in my personal life. And I was like, I'm set. I just can't take another risk at this point. And fortunately for me, they didn't let me say no. And what I found was I was given the opportunity in an environment to fail as many times necessary to be able to find the path to success. And it was the first time in my professional career that I was really given that opportunity to be able to kind of take whatever creatively was in my mind, transform it into paper, establish processes, and wait for it to grow and nurture results. And what came of that exciting opportunity was we were a $2 million company. We ended up getting acquired for $180 million. It was great, right? I was like, whoa, this startup thing, it's phenomenal. But really what it taught me was anytime I have this sense of fear in my heart or in my soul, it's when I need to lean into it, because I'm going to learn something about myself and I'm going to grow, and I'm going to be able to either change myself or change the world in that process. And if anything is just too easy that I'm not nervous about it, it's not worth my time, right? It means I've already conquered it and I know how to get it done and I can accomplish it. And so that's really what kind of projected me into this self-discovery space about myself, right, and about where I stand as a business professional today. So I started working in startups. After that, I really loved the ability to kind of come in and help stabilize a startup institution, because you had that freedom. You have the ability to kind of move as fast as you want to move, come up with as many creative solutions as possible. And probably after my 4th or 5th startup of kind of going in and starting in marketing and then working my way all the way through the entire organization and streamlining processes and being able to generate millions of dollars within less than 3 months time, I was like, why am I only doing this for one company at a time? I have a gift. I feel like anybody who's in the startup world who they have a vision, but they might not necessarily have all of the components to be able to help their business or their vision come to life. I feel like if you take that risk and you decide to leave that mainstream world of a steady paycheck and somebody else, covering all of the stress for you, you have the right to have that vision come to life. And so that was really the birth of Streamline Growth, was really being able to kind of establish my mission as my client's vision. So they entrust me with what their vision is and what their passion is. I understand it, I believe in it, and I make it my own. And then we start working on the right things to be able to essentially put the processes and procedures and the right things in place to be able to help them to get to the point where they achieve success. So that's a little bit about me. And I don't want to babble on too much if necessary.
I think it's amazing. And I think, especially in today's climate, in today's world where the change is happening so fast, there seems to be this quickening. A lot of people find themselves either, consciously or maybe circumstances beyond their control, finding themselves in positions of uncertainty, leaving
Yep.
someplace that they've been for 10, 20, maybe 30 years. Maybe they just got caught up in like, I can't do this anymore. It's killing me, and to find someone who's done it, and not only done it, but is familiar with what it takes to embrace uncertainty. Like, that's what I'm hearing. And like, it's tough to do when you're coming out of something that you've done for so long, especially in the changing dynamics of the market, right? Maybe how do you, like, let's say someone comes out of a job and they're like, you know what, Manda, I'm really good at this. I have this idea. I've always had it. I've been working on it. Now is the time. Like, what are some steps that you go through with that person to really form a bond with them?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And it's funny because I'm actually working through this right now with one of my my husband's like high school best friend, right? So,
Nice.
so really what takes place, and I tend to see this happen a lot, right? So you essentially are working inside of a big organization. You've always had this idea, you've had this like underlying concept of like, hey, I think there's a better way. I think that something out there, it should come to life. And I don't know, like, I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if and then all of a sudden they have to do a reduction in force and your name's on that list. Right.
Yep.
And, it kind of forces your hand. It's like, what do I do now? Like, I have 4 week severance, or I have 3 month severance? And, do I take the time to start building, and how do I go about that? So, and even for the business owners that I start working with right now that have been really rooted in their business for 3 to 5 to 7 years, and they're like,
Right.
okay, I've got something, but now I need to take it to the next step.
Right.
The first thing I do with anybody that I talk to is I start back to the why. So it, and I do feel like sometimes people talk about it and it kind of gets glazed over. And sometimes you might just need that one person to be able to say that one thing that like your vision really starts to click. But I can spend probably upwards of 2 to 3 hours with a client of mine or just a good friend and just say, okay, tell me why this needs to happen. Tell me why this has to change. Tell me what is fundamentally wrong with the process, right? There's so much
Yeah.
time where we come up with these like canned statements of like why we're going to be the best and amazing. And you have these like vision statements that are like 16 paragraphs long, and they're not memorable and they're not repeatable. And oftentimes when we lose sight, when either our business gets super stressful, or we have to start coming up with new approaches, or we just have to step up and start walking on fire, you kind of have to remember that like short and sweet purpose, right? Like, what do I want to do? Like, why am I doing this? Why am I not just going out and getting another job that I could, just collect a paycheck and possibly create this process in the back end? And, why is it important? So the things that I ask people to really start to remember back to, whether it happened 2 weeks ago that you got laid off, or whether you started your business 7 years ago, is I really ask them to reconnect with that feeling of why this business or service needed to come to life. What was the fundamental flaw? What was the thing that you kept seeing, right? So for my business, I just kept seeing over and over again that I was working with small organizations that their businesses, their verticals were very siloed, right? So because a startup organization typically doesn't have a ton of structure, right? You have this
Yep.
solopreneur or a group of core four, and they all kind of go off and they all do their own things and they don't really talk to one another, but you start creating something that's worth something. And then you're like, okay, well, we need people in order to scale. So I'm just going to throw a marketing person over there, but I'm not really going to talk to marketing. And I've got these salespeople and they're going to be kind of cool. And we're just hope that they just bring us business. And, and then from a fulfillment side, in operations, like we're going to have a process, but we're not going to really talk to sales in any way, shape or form. Right. And that's what I fixed. I just fixed communication layers. I always said I built the bridges between these organizations that if sales isn't communicating to marketing and marketing isn't communicating in lockstep with what sales needs, you're going to have messaging that's not going to resonate with what sales has to present. And if sales is able to close things, but they're not able to talk to operations and really help them understand what they need to deliver, you're never going to have client retention. You're going to lose your clients, right? And so startup organizations for me, I'm like, I could see where essentially we've just continuously rinsed and repeat these silos because most core four or startup founders, they can work and wear 17 hats. But when they start adding in their resources, they're adding in resources that are typically working in a 9-to-5, very structured environment, right? So the 5% that's founding the company that have always worked in startups and know how to work independently and can bring unique ideas to the table isn't the 95% that they actually build into their business, right? So I ask people, I'm like, go back to that very beginning. Go back to that reason why you're like, this business model that I'm bringing to life is important and needs to be in the forefront of people's attention, right? The second thing is I tell them to get angry, right? I tell them to go back to the reason why they're like, I'm no longer going to apply for another job and I want to be my own boss and I want to take this risk. Because there has to be passion behind it, right? If you create a vision statement and you create a purpose that really does not connect emotionally with something that speaks to your soul, you're never going to be able to inspire your team members to follow along with that vision or that passion. Or when funds get tight and you just need to say, hey, I need you to hang on for 3 more months at a lower salary so we can make payroll, they're not going to be invested in it, right? So you want to really be able to, number one, stay as intimately as connected as possible to what your vision statement is. And then secondarily, you need to make sure that it permeates your organization. You need to know that you can really stand in front of your entire team and lead them based upon what that vision is and that they all believe in you, right? They'll follow you blindly because they're like, man, this girl or this guy is just so passionate about this and they believe that it's there and they believe in me as part of that puzzle that's going to make it happen. And if you can do that and you can create this little army that's following you based upon essentially what your fundamental belief was, whether they were there with it or not, you're going to have an entire successful engine that's going to help you progress your business forward. So I personally, I feel like that's the most important part. And when you can figure that out and you can make it repeatable and make it memorable, it really helps your organization and your business to thrive.
It's really well said. And it makes me think of so many founders or so many people with a vision and they translate that vision into reality. On some level, you almost have to fall on really hard times because that's the catalyst for it. You should be either angry or crying, but that. And when you get to that point, hopefully a bell or something clicks and it's okay, that's the passion you need in order to make it successful. You have to go there in order to get here. That's the only thing that's going to drive you there is this unwavering passion and energy to be not again. This is for my family. And then, there's sometimes that question of you're what about your family? You're yeah, I'm doing this for my family. This is the only way I can do it. You got to understand that you'll never live the life you really want without leaving the life that you're already doing. And that's scary for people, right? That's a tough thing to do.
Yep. And when it's truly successful for founders is when you can actually get everybody that has come in to support your business to provide that much risk, right? So the founders and the CEOs, they're leveraging everything, right? They're leveraging, they're doing second mortgages and,
Yep. Yep.
going through all these things to be able to fund their businesses. And they have so much on the line. But additionally, their team members that jump in and do the same things. It's like, I've worked with so many amazing companies where the people that I work with side by side, they're just phenomenal people, and they could leave and they could get a salary that's 10x what they're getting in these startup organizations, but they believe that something is about to happen that they had impact on, right? And I feel like in any business, whether you're a small business, whether you're a big business, if you can lead by influence and you can
Mm,
say what your impact is, and that really truly at the end of the day, right, that's all we want. We want to know that we impacted something in a positive way. And if
yeah.
we feel that even our smallest bit of activities influenced the ability for us to be able to get to the point where the business got acquired or the goal was achieved, your loyalty to that company is going to be so much greater, because you've influenced, right? Influence, like,
Yeah.
did I live? Did I love? Did I matter? Right? Like, that's a big thing, right?
Yeah.
People just want to feel like they mattered. And I feel so much too for our younger generation. They've gotten it so much better than what we have, right? So like we've influenced our younger generation to say, hey,
Yeah.
you deserve more and you should create more. And now I feel like they're getting a lot of flack for it, right? Like they come into an organization and they're like, listen, I don't want to scrub your database of emails
Yep.
and, maybe just push a paper here. And like, I want to create impact, right? So if you can create impact through your leadership abilities and through casting why it's important to show up and punch a clock and send an email, or really just show up every day and do your role, whatever that role is scripted for you, you'll have loyalty and you'll have retention, and you'll be able to get more out of everybody, just through something as simple as kind of casting your vision and really staying true to it.
Yeah. I think as we begin to scratch the surface of the world of startups and this world that we have passed on to this next generation, I think what we're seeing underneath the first coat is this idea of something meaningful. What does it mean to live a meaningful life? And all of us, when you get down to it, like a lot of people get up and they work this job that they don't like because they're doing it for their family. But when you look at someone who has an idea that's contagious, a founder, a startup, something like this idea of contagion is a way in which we are passing meaning to each other. And like that's what people love, right? It's like, hey, this person inspires me. When you think about influence, you think about inspiration, you think about contagion, you think about growth. Like these
Mhm.
are real ideas that are permeating the community. And we need more of them, man. That we need more of this young generation to step up and be like, you know what? I believe in myself. And I'm gonna test this theory that I've read in all the mythology my whole life that says if you believe in something, you can do it. Why can't you get up and love what you do? Like, why can't that happen? We need more of that. And I see you doing that. It's beautiful. Maybe you could speak to that idea a little bit more.
No, and that's like, it's so funny because that's like, it's like nail on the head, right? So how do you like advertise a business that basically says like, I believe in you, right? So in all transparency, the reason why my relationships with my CEOs, whether they're needing me to come in
Yeah.
from a CRO or a COO perspective, the reason why it works is because I believe in them. Like, funny story,
Yeah.
and it was kind of like one of these like aha moments as I'm watching, like, no joke, Netflix the other day. So I'm watching this docu series. It was a true story. There was a girl who was, attacked, and because she came out of the system, they kind of painted the picture that she was lying.
Mm.
And unfortunately, this individual went on to kind of attack multiple people in different districts, so that way hopefully it wouldn't be traced. And they were very, very good at what they were doing to make sure that they kind of covered all of their tracks. Um, and they showed the progression of the individual that was essentially deemed as a liar, and she ended up getting sued by the police, for essentially wasting their efforts and lying, that she was attacked even though she wasn't attacked. And you saw her get smaller and smaller and smaller throughout the entire series of that. Like, listen, this is the best that I've got. I'm just going to go with what they tell me to do, keep my mouth shut, and I'll only have probation, and I have to pay a $500 fine, and I have to beg and plead to get this $500 fine. And towards the end of the series, finally these two detectives had pieced the entire puzzle together, and they had identified that she was actually one of the very first attacks that this individual had committed. And what happened was, long story short, she ended up getting a massive settlement from the police because of defamation of character and really putting her through this rigmarole, right? But the whole thing that I kept thinking is that you saw the progression of being small, small, smaller, smaller, invisible, to this point of just having one person believe in her. And when there was one person who actually said, I'm sorry, this happened. We know it happened. And we want you to have the rights that you deserve. Her essence and her being just grew like exponentially, to the point where she wasn't taking the $5,000 settlement check that they presented to her. They said, no, I think you need to see your day in court now. And she was able to get a bigger settlement from it. And so I just wrote down, I'm like, does it just take one person to believe in you in order for you to be able to take over the world, right? And personally, when I work side by side with my CEOs, it's typically because they come in, they have this idea, they need to scale, they start throwing resources at it in terms of wherever they feel is best to be able to position and help them scale quickly. But they don't necessarily have that strategic person that sits beside them that's saying, yep, this is possible, and this is how we're going to make it happen. And so what I do with my clients, I call them visionaries, right? So they've got these really big ideas. They tend to have a lot of ideas, and they tend to not be able to kind of ground them into a strategic plan. And so my job is to come in, to see what their vision is, to understand what the product is, to say, yep, this is possible, and this is how we're going to do it. And then I ground the organization in the strategy and the next step. So that way we have those people that need a little bit more structure. We might not have everybody in the organization that's used to working in a startup, but everybody knows what their role is, why it's important to succeed in that specific role, and how to measure success. So that way they know that they've influenced the overall success of the business, right? So it's hard to say, but I'm just a believer, right? I'm that one person that I'm like, listen, you deserve to have this idea come to life. So let's talk about it. Let's make sure that when you've got the crazy idea that pivots us 6 ways since Sunday, that it makes strategic sense for us to make the pivot now, or should we wait 2 months before we do it, right? Yes, for sure. I know you can go ahead and write that email 100 times faster than our professionals can do it right now. But unfortunately, I got to teach them how to learn our messaging, and they're going to only learn by doing it if you let them do it. And they just sit back and they're like, yeah, you're right. Yep, you're right. You're right. So it's just kind of like, sometimes I'm a little bit of a grounder. Sometimes I'm a little bit of a motivator, helping people feel that somebody sees me and believes in me and gives me that extra energy and motivation to know that I can really accomplish anything as long as I just put my mind to it.
Yeah. It sounds like you have an uncanny ability to help people translate vision into reality, and people need that. They need, because if I see something, does it exist? But if we all see something, it definitely exists. And we need that. We need people around us to amplify, to point to the picture, to point why it works. And I think it's imperative. So many people have that idea, but they don't have people behind them that believe in them. And then that idea dies on the vine. And so too, does a little part of them die, right? When no one believes in them, it's like a thought. I believe that thoughts are things. And when you have a thought, it becomes your idea. Your ideas become your words become your actions, and it just transgresses that way. But it's interesting. I guess, you emphasize surrounding yourself with professionals who share a clear vision. How do you go about building and nurturing a network of like-minded individuals? And how has it contributed to your success?
So it's really funny. So the models that I use, I surround myself in as well, right? So, right here. So I'm a big pen, paper. I love colors. I don't know why. Colors just make me happy.
Nice.
But the thing for me, the strategies that I employ is that first and foremost, I will always use the EOS model. It's the entrepreneurial operating system. And it's essentially written in a book called Traction. I don't know if you've ever heard of it before. But it starts off with a vision traction organizer. The importance of that is to really sit down and be able to understand vision, mission, values of the organization. Really, what are your three uniques of your business? Like, what makes you different? And the biggest thing that I impress upon most of my clients is I'm like, hey, it's not faster, better, cheaper. It's you. Like, you are the one thing that is the unique component out of anything that's sitting out there. Let's not forget that. And what is that attribute, right? And then from there, you start talking about like really big, audacious goals. What is your 3-year strategy, 1-year strategy? And then you get really super tactical, okay? What I try to do is every 12 weeks, you are revisiting this business blueprint. So you're going back every 12 weeks and you're saying, okay, what are the big things? Like, what is my vision statement? Here it is. What does it mean to me? This is why it's important to me as a CEO. What are any challenges, right? Does my team see it? Can my team repeat that? What would be the biggest blocker to them understanding what that vision statement is, right? So as a CEO, you're evaluating those things almost on a 12-week cycle. So I follow a 12-week year because I do feel like every single day, especially in the startup world, is like, it's so fast, right? You don't have an entire year to make it or break it. Sometimes you really only have a couple weeks to be able to get to the point where you have enough room to breathe, right? So every 12 weeks, you want to go back to those things and revisit those things and say, do they still make sense to me? Do they still resonate? Do I need to change them? Did I learn anything over the past 12 weeks that might make me want to shift or adjust any of the targets that I've had? I think on an annual basis, really sitting down and evaluating your values of your company, right? So my team personally, in order for somebody to come and work with my team, so we are a fractional team. It's not just my IP and then hopefully you can execute all the cool bells and whistles. We have a whole team that essentially I come in, I help strategize, and then my team is the executor of all of these things. And so truly when we're talking to anybody, it's like, we're the best of the best. You're getting a fractional resource at a fraction of the cost, but you're getting maximum output. So it's just easy, right? It's easier. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to worry about bringing the person up to speed. Like, we're getting there for you. And that's one of my values, is that like, I want to confidently know that anytime I pass anybody to any one of my team members, that they're like, they're blown away. They're blown away by the ideas. They're blown away by the recommendations. They're blown away by the results. So that way they can get to the point where they're like, okay, it's time for me to get a full-time resource. And so I feel like as if you're not constantly reminding yourself and rooting yourself in where you want to go, you often lose sight of that. And that's where, from a visionary perspective or a CEO perspective, that's sometimes where I really help ground people, is that because when we get to the point where financial resources are constrained, you're not getting the investors knocking down your door that you expected to, or you got all the way to the point of signing paper and then you never heard anything back. And you're like, I was so close. Holy crap. What am I going to do now? What happens is then they just start to say, okay, I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to do this. And it's that tyranny of the urgent, right? They're pushing you in so many directions to be able to get that next dollar in the door. And sometimes it's just a matter of saying like, okay, let's go back to our roots. Let's go back to the point of where we started from. What do we want as a team? Does it make sense? I often use the example of it's used in the book Traction, and it's like a simple and easy example for me, right? So they talk about your niche, and really like, what do you want to be the best at? Because that helps build your vision, and it helps to also keep you grounded when you get into that like panic mode of like, I have to bring in revenue today and I don't know what to do, right? So they use an example that Orville Redenbacher is, they've used this model, and their niche. So the one thing that they want to be better at than anybody else is popcorn. It's so simple, right? So if Orville Redenbacher sees that their revenue starts to dip, and the CEO comes back and says, okay, well, I'm going to start, like, I want to start buying cattle, and I think we need to do this and that. And like, really, the second in command, anybody in the organization can say, how does that relate to popcorn? And it really just brings you back and it grounds you, right? So you
Yeah.
have to have that grounding mechanism. Either it's a person or it's a statement or it's an understanding of, like, when I feel to the point where I need to pivot because I'm stressed and beyond control, like, what's the one thing that's going to ground me? And really understanding what your niche and what you want to do better than anybody else helps you kind of avoid that tyranny, tyrannical
Yeah.
tyranny of the urgent kind of curvy road that unfortunately it derails success and it postpones any real growth, because any project your team was working on, they have to stop, pivot, and try a new project that you might just pull out from underneath them in 10 minutes when the next emergency arises, right? So helping establish that is, and really staying connected to that and having your team understand that connection helps you really stay continuously focused on how do you get to the bigger goal.
It Thank you. It's really well said, and I admire the background and understanding a little bit about how the idea works. My next question has to do with just this idea of fractional. Fractions can be big numbers, fractions can be small numbers. Maybe you work with someone for a long time, maybe you work with them for a short time. And also on some level, it seems to me that fractional teams like yours are really creating a new way in which streamlining great ideas for communities can be incredible, because you can go and maybe you work with one founder for a month and they get it. That's whatever their goal was. Maybe they needed you for that time. You mentor them for a month, boom, they're good. Maybe you work with someone else for a year and you mentor them. But your team is constantly being nimble and moving throughout different communities, and you're learning along the way. Maybe you could speak to this idea, this wave of fractional, and maybe your team specifically, about what you guys are learning and how it's radiating out into the world as a positive thing.
Yeah, so for us, I feel like the world's gotten a little bit jaded by what consultants can do, right? Because
Yes.
everybody's like, I promise you the world. And, whether the synergies between the individuals just didn't work out, or whether the solutions they presented were not the right solutions, or whether the ROI just wasn't there, the the premise for our business is truly that we're going to pass our IP to you. We don't want you to use us for the rest of your, like, we want to work ourselves out of a job. Like, that
Right.
is our primary goal, right? Because if we do our job well, you should be able to scale to the point where you need a full-time asset, and that's where we kind of were like, okay, we did our job,
Yeah.
we showed you the right things, and now you're scaling to the point where you're exceeding next steps. Um, and I think that's the difference between my organization and other fractionals. So we do offer really budget friendly solutions, right? You can retain us for as minimal as 20 hours a month, which is 5 hours a week. You could do a full part-time engagement, right? Where you're 20 hours a week, 80 hours a month of just having an entire team permeate your organization and be able to help you progress it forward. The goal for us is to be able to understand, number one, your messaging, refine it to the point where it's truly hitting the target audience that you need to be successful, to be able to build enough of a pipeline so that way you have the right processes, the right target audience, you've taken your product, if you have a product or your service, to that next level, so that way you're really understanding what your market value really is, and then being able to deliver on those results. So for us, we deliver like a 90-day ROI. So we establish new goals every 30, 60, 90 days. We have a unique set of targets that our team is supposed to be responsible for hitting. And then after every 90 days, we will come back with a new set of targets, right? So we are really goal-based and goal-driven because we want to constantly show you what we've done to progress your business every 30 days. Like, it's not acceptable for us to stay in one place. And if we do there's a very specific reason for that. And we're able to kind of provide you with that information. The next piece for us is, because we understand your business so intimately, because we were part of your team, we then do essentially values-based interviewing to be able to find the right people that would integrate well with your team. You don't just want an individual. You want somebody who operates off the same value system, right?
Yeah.
That's going to blend well. That's going to see value in the output of what they're able to provide you. And then from there, with the processes that we create standard operating procedures. We create training. So we do video training that then goes into your library. So that way, in the event that the resource doesn't work out, what you're able to do is then they have a full training library that's conducted by us, that's still there, that you don't have to really get involved in once we've exited stage right, and now you have full-time assets in there. And I think that's the piece, at least that I've seen for my clients, that it's built that peace of mind. We've had clients for 5 years. We've had clients for 6 years. And in some instances for those clients, they didn't need a full-time asset. They know that it's a part-time position that would never really need to scale outside of that, but they wanted to go off and start a secondary business. So they've given us really keys to their kingdom to operate and run their entire organization off of very limited hours. So that way they can go and build another empire somewhere else. And on a weekly basis, we give them an update on how things are going. If there are any major fires that need to be put out, they're being called in. But really, they're just a CEO, right? Like they're just, everything else is happening, running, and functioning the way they want it to be, and we're moving all the cogs for them, right? And other institutions, they're getting to the point where we're scaling to the point where we're like, okay, listen, guys, like we love you to death, and we know that you love us, and that things have worked really well, but like I think it's time for us to kind of start exiting. And usually when we push we push the exit because it's getting to the point where the demand for us will be too great for us to be able to support growth for any other client.
It's really well said. Can you give me an example of a relationship that you really admire?
That's a big question.
I know. It's a good one, though.
It is a good one. If I had to say the relationship that I really admire, it would be the one between myself and my 18-year-old. Because I've always been a great communicator. My EQ is
I can tell. Off the charts.
Pretty big. Yeah, like it's pretty big, right?
Of course.
And so I feel like I've always prided teaching my children kind of the value, because it was instilled in me when I was younger, right? My father and my mother, our foundation of our household was really just based on communicating. Like you just communicated until the cows came home, and that was what you did. And so I transferred that education to our children. But then watching my daughter go through some really challenging personal journeys of her own, watching her educate me on how I can even elevate my EQ on top of like the tools that I gave her, and then the tools that she learned through her own journey, and then the respect that we have with one another from a communication perspective is probably one of, I always say it's one of my greatest success stories, right? It is like, put a fork in me, I'm done. I'm successful with how that's all worked out. I mean, she's still a teenager. She's still sometimes, doesn't make the best decisions, but like, I feel like grand scheme of things, like that relationship that we have and that ability to be able to trust one another with just valuable information and how to communicate has taught me even further how to transition that with my team and my business. And I do feel like at her young age, she feels as though she has a greater impact and she's meant for something greater today. Not really knowing what that is yet, but I know that she believes that there's something great for her that's next up. So,
It's wonderful. Yeah, thanks for answering it. I think it's a great way to, I walked you right up to the 11 o'clock hour. And before I let you go though, first off, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed it. We should talk more. I think we just scratched the surface of it, but where can people find you? What do you have coming up and what are you excited about?
Yeah, so you can find me streamlinegrowth.net. That is our business page. You get to see kind of the full landscape of our team, all the services that we can offer. Um, and coming up, so it's so weird because I work with so many different clients. I go on the road with my clients and I operate and I stand and I function in a room as them, right? So I'm headed to Pittsburgh. I'm going to be going to North Carolina in a couple weeks doing some panel discussions. Yeah, so lots of different things, but just for different businesses. So if you're interested in catching up with me at any of those locations, let me know. And really just excited for what 24 is about to present, right? Been doing a lot of manifesting in the new year and really just casting my vision for what's next and putting a lot of my limiting beliefs behind me so that way I can focus and really invite in everything that is supposed to be in front of me. And so I think it's all next, right? It's all just driftwood and I'm picking up the little pieces here and there.
Meaningful. I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, hang on briefly afterwards, man. I'll talk to you just briefly afterwards. But to everybody who got to spend some time with us today or when you're ever listening to this, go down to the show notes, reach out to Mandas, check her out. She's incredible, off the charts. Her EQ it'll blow your mind just to talk to her. Thank you so much for being here, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a wonderful day. That's all we got. Aloha.